Hello, welcome back to I Am Movies. Today we'll be covering the intrusive 2015 American science fiction action thriller film known as Selfless. Before we get started, be sure to give us a thumbs up, drop a comment, and hit the subscribe button to stay updated. With that said, let's get started. Damian Hale, a terminally ill real estate billionaire battling cancer, becomes worried as his speculated death day draws nearer. However, during this time, he holds a meeting with his friend and business partner Martin in a luxury restaurant as they discuss a potential contract that was expected to be awarded to a young real estate startup, Carl. During the meeting, Carl mentions that Damian was his inspiration for getting into real estate. However, Martin reminds Carl about a statement he once made to undermine Damian's real estate company. While using Damian's health condition to mock him, Carl tries to cover it up, but Damian is bent on teaching him a lesson by taking him off the contract. On hearing this, Carl angrily gets up, hurls insults at Damian, and walks out on them. However, the two seem unbothered as they continue to talk about Damian's current health status. On their way out, Damian asks Martin if he has heard about something called shedding.
You ever hear about something called shedding?
But Martin seems not to have any idea about it. On his way, Damian tries to reach his daughter, Claire, but she won't pick up his call as their relationship is strained due to Damian's absence while she was growing up. Later, Damian brings out a business card for a biogenic organization called Phoenix from his wallet. This organization helps people transfer their consciousness to another body, which they term shedding. Damian decides to visit the organization and speaks with the CEO, Mr. Albright. Albright explains that the bodies they use are genetically engineered for perfection, and while they are talking, one of the bodies moves in response to their presence. Damian is shocked, but Albright explains that it's just a body of tissue. Albright continues to convince Damian to take the procedure, stating that he's a brilliant mind that needs to stay alive and all. At the end, Albright asks Damian, "Do you feel immortal?"
Do you feel immortal?
The next day, Damian decides to visit Claire in her office. Claire is an activist trying to build a political presence, but Damian thinks she's wasting her time, which further strains their relationship. Damian asks Claire to go on a ride with him so they can iron things out, but she declines it. Soon, Claire notices that Damian isn't looking too well, and asks him about it, but Damian claims to be fine. After this, Damian offers to support Claire with money, but she rejects it, claiming that Damian always thinks that his money can solve everything. Back home, Damian begins to research about shedding. After a while, he begins to cough out blood and soon collapses. While in the hospital, Damian calls Albright and tells him that he doesn't feel immortal, replying to Albright's earlier question. Albright warns Damian that there is no turning back from the procedure.
There's no turning back. Your old life is over.
Stating that Damian will have to let go of the people in his past. Albright also tells Damian that his death needs to be public and soon gives him a location in New Orleans where it will happen. On his way to New Orleans, Damian puts a call through to Martin to meet him for lunch there. However, as soon as Damian lands in New Orleans, he decides to hide some of his documents in a graveyard. Now, during the meeting, Damian drinks a whole cup of coffee and slumps. Soon, Damian is on his way to the lab where they have to finish the shedding procedure before taking his body to the hospital as dead on arrival. At the lab, the doctor asks Damian to remove all metal fillings or objects from his body as it would disrupt the process. They quickly place Damian in the shedding chamber alongside the new body. After a few minutes, it is done. Now, to confirm the success of the procedure, one of the doctors asks the new body, "What's your name?" And he says Damian. Later, Albright shows Damian the news of his death and tells him about the side effects of the transition, which include hallucinations and suicidal thoughts. The next day, Damian begins to train his new body to stand, walk, and swim. Days later, Albright visits Damian and gives him a pill that will always clear his hallucinations and glitches. Damian also began to practice how to master his new identity as Edward Kidner, born on September 20th, 1980, in Phoenix, Arizona, lost all his family in a car crash, and was raised by his uncle Frank in Chicago. After the training, Damian, who is now Edward Kidner, is set to leave the lab, and Albright gifts him his new identity cards. Albright soon takes Damian to his new home and promises to relocate him after some time. Damian gets into his new apartment and looks around with excitement. The next day, Damian goes out to play basketball and impresses everyone with his skills. After the game, his watch beeps, reminding him to take his pills. Later, a man approaches Damian and introduces himself as Anton. They become friends and soon begin to hang out together. Anton introduces Damian to some exciting adventures, and the two begin to bond fast. One day, Damian decides to call Claire, but he hangs up as soon as she picks up. Later, Damian begins to have glitches and soon rushes to the bathroom to grab his pills. However, he passes out before he could take the pills and begins to see memories of war. a little sick girl in a hospital, a lady riding a horse close to a pumpkin-shaped water tower. Damian recovers from this and soon narrates the visions to Albright. Damian tells Albright that his visions looked real and disturbing, stating that the little girl needs his help, but Albright tells him that it might have been a memory of his past as a child, stating that the Latina lady he saw could have been as a result of a one-night stand. Damian becomes suspicious, since he never mentioned that the lady he saw was Latina. Albright realizes his mistake and soon changes the subject by giving Damian an envelope with details of his new location, alongside a double dose of medication that will last him for 2 weeks. As Damian prepares to move to his new location, he decides to search for the exact pumpkin-shaped water tower he saw, and soon finds it located in St. Louis, Brighton County. Damian goes to the graveyard to pick up his documents, and heads to the airport the next day as part of Albright's plan to change his location, but Damian has his own plan. Once at the airport, Damian changed his travel destination to St. Louis. While in St. Louis, Damian locates the pumpkin tank, and also spots a house close to it. Damian gets into the house just to find himself in a family picture, alongside the little girl and lady in his visions. He continues to walk around the house, and sees more pictures that prove his visions to be real. Soon, Madeline, the lady, points a gun at Damian as he turns around slowly. Madeline is shocked to see her late husband. However, they begin to hear a loud knock which causes Damian to panic as he asks Madeline if she had invited anyone over, but she says no. Damian grabs her gun and goes to the door. As soon as Damian opens the door, things begin to unfold before his eyes. He soon discovers that Anton works for Albright and that Mark used to be Madeline's husband. Albright then explains to Damian that it was his money that was used to treat Mark's daughter Anna when she was sick in exchange for Mark's body. This idea does not sit well with Damian, but Anton instructs him to go inside the car waiting outside. Damian asks what will happen to Madeline, and Anton says he'll make it look like an accident, which means they'll kill her. Damian's watch beeps, and he asks that they allow him to use his pills in the toilet. While in the toilet, Damian sees them burning Madeline's car, and one of the men soon joins him in the toilet. Damian pretends to be busy after using his pill, and soon takes out the guy. Anton and one of the other men rush to the toilet's entrance asking Damian to come out, but as soon as one of them cocks his gun, Damian shoots him in the shoulder. Anton soon walks into the toilet unharmed, and tries to convince Damian to stop, but it soon escalates into a fight. As they continue to fight, Damian pushes Anton out of the house as he attempts to shoot Madeline. While outside, Anton orders one of his boys to shoot Damian, but Damian quickly rushes back inside. Anton soon instructs his men to burn them up in the house as he continues to shoot. Damian wakes Madeline up, and together they escape to the basement of the house. While in the basement, Damian manages to kill all of them and escape with Madeline. However, Madeline still believes that Damian is her husband, as she blames him for leaving her. Later, Madeline asks that they go pick up Anna from school immediately. While waiting in the car, Damian watches a video of Anna's birthday from Madeline's phone, where Anna's birthday wish was that her dad would teach her how to swim. Later, that night, they lodge in a hotel, but Damian soon becomes restless, as he finds out that he'd lost his pills. He steps out of the hotel to browse where he can buy another one, but he can't find any. However, he soon finds out from a video that Dr. Francis Jensen, who started the shedding program, had taken the body of Albright, his student. He also finds out that Dr. Francis Jensen has a wife named Philly Jensen, who is a medical doctor. Shortly after this, Damian begins to have glitches, and later wakes up on the floor. The next day, Damian drives to Philly Jensen's apartment and introduces himself as one of her late husband's students. Damian asks her for Dr. Francis's files, hoping to find the formula for the pills, but Dr. Philly keeps deviating from the subject while emphasizing Albright. Damian realizes how important Albright is to his quests and decides to trick him into the house using Dr. Philly. As soon as Albright arrives, he realizes that he has been tricked. Damian asks Albright for pills that will last him for a while, but Albright keeps talking about the potential of his program to keep famous people alive, while he continues to emphasize on how Damian will fade into oblivion if he stops taking the pills. After a while, Damian suggests that they go to the lab, holding Albright at gunpoint, but on their way out, one of Albright's men quickly takes Damian's gun, and he soon becomes the prisoner himself, as begins to have glitches. Meanwhile, Madeline was already standing outside the building. Soon, a fight breaks out, and Damian manages to take out some of the guys, and soon realizes that Anton is alive in another body. However, Anton decides to spill the beans by telling Madeline to ask Damian for her birthday to see if it's not her husband. This revelation confuses Madeline, and she begins to ask questions. On their way, Madeline asks Damian to stop the car to confirm her suspicion. However, Damian tells her the truth about his identity. Later, Damian promises Madeline that he'll take her to a new place where she can start over. But first, they head over to Martin's place to use his plane. However, Damian had to spend some time convincing Martin that it was him. Martin tells Damian that it will take some time to fuel his jet and file the papers for their travel, so they have to wait. Meanwhile, Damian uses the time to fulfill Anna's wish and decides to teach her how to swim. After that, Damian and Madeline get to know each other. Damian tells her about his daughter, Claire, and Madeline talks about her husband and their plan to live in the Caribbean. Meanwhile, Anna soon wanders into a room. Later, Damian and Madeline begin to search for Anna and soon find her playing with a boy named Tony, Martin's son. Damian decides to leave as he realizes that they have been betrayed since Tony died 2 years earlier. This means that Albright must have helped him shed his son into another body. As soon as they rush out of the room, Damian asks Martin how much time he has before Albright's men arrive, but it is too late as they are already outside. Madeline asks Martin why he did something like that to his son, but Martin doesn't see anything wrong in it, since they told him Tony's new body was made in the lab. However, Damian explains to him that they only exchanged someone else's body for Tony's. Martin feels betrayed at this point and decides to help them escape. Madeline escapes with her daughter. Damian creates a distraction by driving out through the front with Martin's tinted SUV, while Martin takes Madeline and Anna through the backyard. Damian drives out of the building, but they refuse to follow him. After a while, his SUV gets shot, and 2 other cars begin to chase him. After a while, they realize they have been tricked, and Anton instructs one of them to go and check the back of the house. The rest continue to chase Damian, eventually crashing into each other alongside Damian, leaving many dead. Meanwhile, Madeline sees a car waiting at the back of Martin's house, thinking it's Damian, but by the time she got there, it was too late as Albright's men kidnapped them. Later that night, Martin meets Damian in a restaurant to inform him about what happened. Damian becomes disappointed, but things become clearer as he soon realizes that it was Martin who slipped the Phoenix Biogenic business card into his wallet. However, Martin also gives Damian the formula for the pill, stating that he had asked some people to reverse engineer the drug to get the formula for his son's use. Using clues from his glitches, Damian was able to find out where Albright's lab was located. Damian sneaks into the lab by taking out some security men and soon finds the shedding room. While inside the room, Damian realized he'd been tricked down there. Damian tried to shoot through the glass wall, but it was impossible to do. Some men soon enter the room to hold Damian down. Soon, Albright decides to expel Damian and replace him with Anton. However, during the process, Damian had put a bullet in his mouth to disrupt the process. After everything was done, Damian was asked, "Who are you?" And he says Anton just to deceive them. Albright decides to confirm further by asking him how many kids he had, and he says none, which confirms his genuity. After dressing up, Damian, now acting in place of Anton, takes the gun of one of his men and goes to meet with Madeline, acting like he is going to kill them, but he soon begins to turn on Albright's men as they begin to exchange bullets. Meanwhile, Albright hid behind the lab's bulletproof glass as he began to brag about how he was the only one with the formula for the pills. To Albright's surprise, Damian recites the components of the pill as he uses a flamethrower to burn Albright and the whole lab. Damian sends Madeline to a Caribbean island after giving her lots of money to survive on. Damian also decides to visit Claire and introduces himself as Edward Kidner, a messenger from Damian Hale. He also gives her a letter containing things he wished he'd said to her before leaving. Days later, Mark wakes up in a room in the Caribbean, confused to see himself alive. He sees a laptop with an appreciation message from Damian, asking him to take care of Madeline. It appears that Damian had stopped taking the pill, and his consciousness has now faded away. Soon, Mark goes to the Caribbean to find his family, and as soon as he hugs Madeline, she realizes that her husband is alive and well. What really stood out for me in this movie was the extent to which Mark was willing to go to save his daughter, and how Damian also risked everything to protect Madeline, even though he wasn't obligated to do so. So guys, what are your thoughts on the conclusion of the movie? Feel free to leave a comment to share your thoughts. Don't forget to hit the like button, share this recap, and subscribe to stay updated for the next one. Until next time.